What do you expect viewers might have made of the rather abrupt ending to that debate last night, and particularly how Liz Truss, someone who's been accused of perhaps being robotic in the past, how she responded to that incident?
Yeah, I think that's a good point, actually, and obviously that's the clip that lots of people will be watching today, rather than necessarily the content of the rest of the debate. And I do think it probably was you don't want to talk about the political impacts of these things, but it certainly was a humanising moment for her. She has had a bit of a reputation for not quite being the kind of performer. She often looks, as you say, a little bit robotic, and this was a moment in which she seemed very human, and she did sort of respond in a way that I think many people would be able to relate to. So, given that that's the clip that's being widely played today, I imagine it probably was a good moment for her.
Well, let's explore some of the polling that has taken place. Of course, there wasn't any polling after the debate last night, but after Monday night, we did see some. First of all, your company, Opinium, gave us this analysis that amongst Conservative voters, Liz Truss won, but amongst people who voted for the Labour Party in 2019, Rishi Sunak was ahead. Liz Truss ahead there by 9 points amongst Conservative voters. There were also these polls from YouGov, another polling firm, of course, which showed that amongst Conservative members, Liz Truss carried 50%, whereas Rishi Sunak only carried 39%. A considerable lead there for Liz Truss amongst Conservative members, according to YouGov. Chris Curtis, those two different polling companies there, corroborating that result, one looking at Conservative voters, the other looking at Conservative members. Liz Truss seems ahead.
Yeah, I mean, look, it doesn't, Rishi Sunak needed some movement here. Pretty much all of the polls for the past few weeks have shown that Liz Truss is comfortably in the lead among Conservative Party members. Rishi Sunak needed to appeal to Conservative Party members ideologically, but more importantly, to show he was the kind of person who would best appeal to the public, best win a general election. He didn't do that in Monday night's debate. And to be honest with you, I think he's running out of opportunities to close that gap with Liz Truss, to make the argument that he would be the better leader of the Conservative Party. And at this stage, I now think the overwhelming likelihood is that Liz Truss ends up being Prime Minister this September.
That's a pretty extraordinary claim, because, of course, there is a long time in this leadership contest to go. We've got over a month more of debates, of hustings, and indeed of voting. What makes you say that it's unlikely now that Rishi Sunak can turn it around?
Well, there's a few. Firstly, overwhelming likelihood. I will make the slight caveat that there's obviously still a chance, and there is no certainty in these things. But the reason I think at this stage there is an overwhelming likelihood. Firstly, obviously, Liz Truss holds that comfortable lead among Conservative Party members. Secondly, one of the reasons that Rishi Sunak is struggling is because of trust. A lot more people say they trust Liz Truss than say they trust Rishi Sunak. Trust is one of those things that's hard to gain back once you've lost it. Polling has shown that pretty consistently. Thirdly, I think today's going to be a rough day for him. He has U-turned, or is perceived, the way that the narrative is being spun at least, is that he's U-turned on what was one of his biggest dividing lines with Liz Truss, which I really just do not think is going to help him and his campaign. And I just think that, yes, you're right, of course, there's many weeks left to go before we end up getting the result. But ballot papers, start going out very soon. We know a lot of Conservative Party members vote very early on, and while they have the chance, in the sort of strange system we've got here, to change their mind after they voted, if they vote online, I think that there'll be very few people who end up doing so.
So if you were advising the Rishi Sunak campaign, this U-turn on VAT on fuel, something that he supported, having VAT on fuel as recently as a couple of months ago in the House of Commons, now saying he would cut VAT on fuel were bills to rise further. Would you say that that's a mistake, given that this crucial issue of trust is so important in this contest? Would he have been better to say, actually, I'm sticking in favour of these higher taxes, of this fiscal consolidation, because that's at least consistent?
Yeah, it's ultimately what you just said there. It's not what I would have done. He had a dividing line with Liz Truss, and it wasn't a particularly bad dividing line for him. Sure, Conservative Party members would want tax cuts. Everybody would want tax cuts. But they also appreciated the sort of fiscally sound, don't spend too much money argument that he was previously putting forward. He's kind of lost that dividing line which sort of worked for him. Plus he's got the downside of having U-turned, and, you know, that sort of builds into this he's not trustworthy argument. I do think it's certainly not what I would have done if I was in his position.